A veteran who now works as a volunteer counter-recruiter discouraging kids from joining the military explained that recruiters tell kids that joining the military is a way to advance in life. The military offers training, status, money, and education. What the recruiters never tell the kids is that there are other ways to get these things without having to learn to kill people. Military recruiters are salesmen. They wouldn't be expected to tell kids about other opportunities. But our government should be telling kids about alternatives to the military. And it should be making sure kids have alternatives. Kids should be able to get an education without having to be trained as killers, and they should know about these alternatives. But our government has been taking alternatives away from kids. Financial aid, which is essential for anyone who wants to get a college education, except rich kids, is harder and harder to get. And our government has even been pouring money into military high schools in poor neighborhoods at the same time that it has been making money for regular high schools scarce, so that kids who want a good high school education are funneled into the military. If going into the military was such a smart thing to do, our government wouldn't have to recruit so hard. Kids would just join. The fact is, joining the military isn't a very smart thing for most kids to do. For one thing, it's dangerous. And a lot of the training you get there isn't worth much. Most companies don't need trained killers on their payroll. The U.S. Post Office, which became a dumping ground for veterans, learned this the hard way when their employees' violence became known as going postal. Some companies are so uninterested in hiring veterans that laws have been passed forcing them not to refuse to hire veterans. What would happen if not enough people joined our military? Our government would have to think about how it could get by without so many people in our military. Their first impulse would probably be to try to develop new weapons that could be used instead of sending soldiers. That's a big part of what the buildup of our nuclear arsenal was all about. It was cheaper to have huge bombs than huge armies. And that's part of why we have spy satellites instead of spies. But maybe, if we couldn't recruit enough soldiers, we'd start thinking about whether we really need such a huge military capability at all. Maybe we'd start thinking of ways to get along with the rest of the world other than threatening everyone. Other countries get by just fine with militaries that are much smaller than ours. Military recruiters tell kids that joining the military isn't just good for the kids, it's good for the country. Actually, the way we have been using our military, our country would be better off with fewer soldiers, not more. It was pretty easy for us to invade Iraq because we had such a mighty military. If our military had been smaller, we might not have invaded, and our country would be better off right now. Instead of trying to pressure and entice and trick kids into joining our military, for the kids' sake and for the good of our country, what we ought to do is fire the recruiters and cut the size of our armed forces. That would be giving kids more of a chance to be all that they can be.